Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
Dustin Rea.
And today we're going to talk about frameworks for prioritizing tech debt. Dustin, why don't you kick us off? This was your
Yeah,
topic.
yeah, absolutely. So the nice name I use for this is painful prios, right? So there's kind of anytime that you're dealing with kind of a technical and product roadmap, you're going to have to make some like painful prioritization choices. Sometimes people call this ruthless prioritization, is kind of the buzzword that I hear. But another way to think about it is there's like sometimes there's no good choices. It's like, I'm looking at bad and bad, and what's the best way to kind of tackle that. So I think one thing to kind of start it out is I think people are kind of more afraid of the unknown than they are of actually just taking like going through the pain of solving whatever the kind of core issues are. Typically
I've certainly seen
people,
that.
yeah. So
It's
I
like,
mean,
oh,
typically,
it's so huge. I'm like, it will take you
right,
2 minutes.
right, right. Yeah, it's and I think sometimes it's just about the unknown, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
that's kind
Yeah.
of like really what it's about. One phrase I like to use is like just get the cards on the table, right? Like so, one framework you can kind of use to kind of introduce this is like jobs to be done is a popular framework. There's a lot of jobs theory and stuff you can read about like the research behind this and why it works. But from what I've seen is when you can get both product and engineering on the same page about what those jobs are, you get the holy grail of engineering testing where engineers are testing as if they are users, which is kind of like what you hear every product owner and leader say is I wish engineers would test as if they were users, right?
Hmm.
hmm
Um, so that's kind of like one way I think about it. And so even
So, how does that work? Is it literally you make a spreadsheet or a Kanban or something, and you iterate or write down all the jobs that have to be done?
that's one way, right? So that I would think that's kind of like that's like if you have nowhere to start, that's a
Mm-hmm.
good place to start. But I think every business kind of has a mission critical workflow or like unbreakable workflows that should never break. One I use all the time is the bank account balance, right? So if your bank account balance is wrong one day when you come and there's no transaction, you can't figure out why it's the bank account balance on your app is wrong, and the bank says, hey, it was just a bug, our bad, your balance is actually correct now. That's a pretty bad bug, right? Like you would
Mm-hmm.
never want that workflow to break. So I think in every software business, there's kind of these mission critical workflows, and so I think that's really where you start, right? Like what are the mission critical workflows that should never break when users are using them? So it's like what is the user coming here to do, and that's where the jobs to be done framework kind of comes in.
Oh, interesting. So it's a jobs to be done is from the customer's standpoint of these are the jobs that the customer is going to want to do. And it's not jobs to be done like, oh, I need to update the libraries and I need to update the UI and
Correct. So you
okay.
can use that as a lens for prioritizing tech debt, right? So one of your tech debt items may be I need to update a certain library, right? So
Mm-hmm.
where does if you're the scrum leader, right, and that could be an engineer, it could be a product owner, right? Doesn't matter. But if you're prioritizing that piece of work versus let's say updating, some other feature, how do you prioritize which one of these are more important to do given the
hmm
amount of resources? There's always a limit to the resources, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one way you can do that is one of these closer to one of these critical workflows. If it is, and it's blocking or in a big improvement for that workflow, even if this other kind of side workflow is completely broken due to this dependency that we didn't update, it may actually still be more important that we fix this main thing because without it, the software is kind of useless, right? So there's kind of that way to prioritize based on how the customer views those jobs.
So let's keep going with this because it's totally different than what I thought you were saying. So now I'm super into so
Good.
in theory, if you had this jobs to be done, that would be a not quite immutable non-living thing, but like if you've got we did talk about bank accounts. So if you've got like a banking app, right, and the jobs to be done are like view your balance,
Right.
pay bills, deposit checks, something, that list would remain. Like that would be forever. Those would be forever. Like it's not a list of jobs to be done that people have to do. It's a list of. Keep in mind that this is why people are using the app.
Yes.
Hmm.
Right. Exactly. And that sounds very so, and that's why I say before we lose all of the engineering folks, like it may sound very producty, but I think
hmm
there is like the engineering perspective because even if you're say the tech lead or you're just an engineer trying to figure out what's the next thing to pick up, let's say that's important, right? Because as an engineer, you may be trying to climb that ladder. And one of the best ways to climb the ladder is through impact. And so you may be wanting to identify how you can have a bigger impact on the business. I think through that jobs to be done framework, you're now looking at it from the customer's viewpoint, and the way you view your technical debt will be different. Because you may have been viewing it, every engineer is different, right? Some engineers may just view technical debt as, I want to get this done because it'll make my job easier, or it'll make my job more fun, or it'll be, smoother. It'll be like less frustrating is one way to think about it, like the developer experience. So a lot of developers will prioritize that, which those are good, right? Like if that leads to efficiency or, discretionary hours, like after hours and, all that kind of stuff, that's all great. But you still have to balance that with, what is the actual job of this application for the user? And I think that's kind of where that comes in.
This kind of reminds me of some arguments made for upgrading. This is also tech debt, but like upgrading like to the latest version of PHP for things, for example, or not even to the latest, but jumping like a huge version because of some compliance issues. Like now you don't have bug fixes anymore, so you have to go to the next one to remain compliant for whatever series of reasons for your company. If you end up upgrading to the next major version and all of those items on your list there, the user's items, so to speak, are tackled, but you've got one feature that couldn't quite make the upgrade easily without a lot of refactoring because of some other weird deprecations in the language that had to be hacked away, or that it relied on some kind of package that is not compatible with the next version, but they never made that package compatible with the next version, that kind of thing, where it's just like the one thing holding you back. Those are the kind of the interesting ones that can be made arguments for, because you could say it's more important that we're compliant and we've not broken the main customer workflows than it is to remain complete parity with everything. We're willing to let this thing be broken from the upgrade for another few weeks when we try to figure it out, because the trade-off is just as important.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting. This framework is also important for not just tech debt, but just work prioritization. There's a famous Steve Jobs story about the early iPhone where the contacts picker or the contacts app didn't work right. And so after the release demo, Steve Jobs storms into his contacts team area and says, what the hell is this thing supposed to do? And he gets an answer. He says, no, why the hell doesn't it do it? Right?
Right.
Where, this is the same thing. It's like, if these are the tasks to be done, a wonderful question is the software you're writing actually going to do these tasks?
Right. And I think there's a few like methodologies, right? So like this has all been, theoretical stuff. Like, yeah, that all sounds great from a strategy perspective, but how do you actually do it? How do you get the team to start kind of embodying that? I think I kind of wrote down five things that I think are helpful for teams. You don't have to adopt all five, but some combination of these is usually what I see works. So one is like a unified T&P roadmap is what I've called it in the past. And all that really means is just a fancy way of saying engineering and product are deciding together on prioritization. So like product may have prioritization on what the product should do. Design may have input on how it should look and how it should function for the user, like from a UX perspective. And then engineering may have certain, tasks that need to be done just to keep the software alive or to get ready for the next initiative coming in. So once all of those things are blended, everyone kind of has a better sense of where we're going. So I think that's one thing. It's just making sure engineering has that input into the roadmap. Another great thing I've seen, which I don't know if Google actually invented this, but the 20% time rule. So spending 20% of your time on some format of tech debt or improvement of some sort. And you can kind of use that to get back on track. Yeah.
They definitely invented the term 20% time. I don't know if they invented the thing, but definitely that term 20% came from them.
Yeah, so the 20% time is I think is another one of those, like it's a great place to start. If you have no idea like what to do, start with 20% time and you'll get some benefit from that. And I think applying the jobs to be done to that 20% time is kind of like level 2, right? Like now you're getting the most out of your 20% time. If you're not even doing 20% time, jobs to be done isn't going to help you because you're not going back and getting back. Yeah, you're not getting refactored.
And so you're just using that jobs to be done as like a guide, you're saying, for what that 20% time looks like. That way the engineers are working on things impactful.
Exactly. As opposed to just, whatever they just feel like working on
I just
that
wanted
day,
to
or,
clean
you
up
know.
some code today at a random
Yeah,
spot of the app
yeah.
nobody's using.
Yeah, every engineer has that spot of the code where like, man, as soon as I get a day, I am just going to refactor that
Right.
whole thing, like, and that may not be useful for the business, and it costs money, right? Because you're working that day. Uh, Hackathons are another good one for like, especially like short term or like exploratory. We're like, hey, we don't really know how we want to solve this. Let's have a hackathon about it and see what solutions we come up with. So I've seen that work really well. Grooming and retro, so just like your normal Scrum ceremony, some type of ceremony to kind of go through both, like what are we going to be working on, and then a retro of did we get it done? Why didn't we get it done? What can we improve? What do we like? That kind of stuff.
The retro's the most important part in my book of look back and see how it all worked out and what you can change.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. I mean, the retro is key, and that kind of plays into my next one too, the last one, which I think every company definitely needs. This is the one that every company needs. They need some form of technical leadership, right? So whether that's even a tech lead, like within a Scrum team, or whether
Mm-hmm.
that's CTO at a bigger company, there needs to be some type of technical leadership that's kind of guiding all of those other things toward that. And I've seen, the difference between a kind of non-existent tech lead and a really good tech lead is somebody that's really driving that alignment. And I think even naturally, they may not realize it. They're using that jobs to be done framework to make
Hmm.
the prioritization, and that's why they have such high impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. I think, Jeffrey, I think you told me a long time ago is work on the bread and butter applications essentially, or work on the thing that makes the company money. And if you're not on
Yes.
that team, find a way to get on that team. Yeah.
Well, there's two parts to that. One is get on that team and work on the bread and butter. The other one, which was rolling in the back of my head, was the billing system.
Mm-hmm.
Is decades ago, I worked at a company that was making money hand over fist, but our billing system was terrible, and customers owed us like millions of dollars because we couldn't get our bills right. And they're like, "I'm not paying this bill till you figure it out." And nobody was particularly interested in the billing system because we were basically inventing the world of high frequency trading. And you could work on the high frequency trading system, or you could work on the billing system, which is just a crud app.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah, not as interesting.
but the guy who stepped up and fixed the billing system, his career went off like a rocket because now he knows how exchanges bill and how all that works and everything else and all the regulations and all. And so yeah, the work he was doing wasn't, as the CEO said, sexy. But man, when those millions of dollars rolled in, that was super sexy.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Money talks.
Again, back to why the company exists, right? Like, that's
Right.
the job to be done. you know. So
All right.
Awesome.
Any other reflections or musings before we wrap up today's episode?
yeah, I got a couple other things. I think maybe what to look out from like your own perspectives to see this. So I kind of
Yeah.
wrote down from both the manager's perspective and then like the engineering perspective. From a
Mm-hmm.
manager's perspective, you may be fighting constant bugs, incidents, especially in these core workflows. So if you're aware that like, hey, these bugs are definitely more important than these other bugs, and it doesn't seem like your team knows, there's your sauce on the jobs to be done side. So
Mm-hmm.
making sure that they're aware of the same jobs to be done that maybe because you've been talking to leadership or dealing with customers or whatever you've been insulating the team from, you need
Mm-hmm.
to bring some of that clay back to the team. And then from the engineering's kind of experience feels like their perspective. So it feels like a treadmill. So to go to Jeffrey's point, right, like the work becomes very like mundane and cyclical. It's like, man, I just fixed this bug 3 weeks ago. Like, why am I fixing it again? So like if you feel yourself running into that and you're like, I got to get out of here, like we're not making any improvements, there's a signal that, again, like pointing back to what Jeffrey says, there's an opportunity for you to have your career take off by just changing the course of the team there and kind of bringing this up, and this jobs to be done framework can kind of help you do that and bring it to your leadership team and make the change that's needed.
In the world of unit tests, I lose my mind if I see the same bug come back.
Yeah,
I'm like,
right.
the few things I find unacceptable, and the bug came back because we didn't actually write a unit test. Is
Yeah.
one of those things that I will lose my temper.
I will say that there is an example of it that I've seen that even beats unit tests. So like you may have a unit test and you still have this problem is because you have two, usually it's product people, not in communication about the changes that they're making. So one product person wants to change it one way, another product person wants to change it that way. So you do the ticket one way, then you get the bug report that it's not the other way. So you fix that. And you get the bug report that it's not the other way, and you
Keep
step
changing
back.
the
Wait a
test
minute.
with it. Yeah.
What's going on?
But that's not the same. Like that, there you've got the bug. It's not because of a regression. It's because they
Right, but it goes
a
back to
regression
the
of
jobs to be
product.
done, because the two product owners don't have the same idea about what the job to be done is. So,
Yes.
yeah. Oh. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and then from the engineering perspective,
that was the engineering perspective. Yeah, the last one was the engineering perspective. The hamster wheel, so to say. Right?
Oh,
it feels
yes,
like a
yes,
hamster
okay.
wheel, right?
When it comes to the hamster wheel, I guess like loosely related to this, I have like a recurring meeting that I placed on my calendar. It just says metacognition. It's a 15-minute time slot, and it's just a moment to think about: is there anything repetitive in what I've been doing these past few weeks, or the past week rather, that I can simplify, or like just step back for a moment and have I been kind of doing a hamster wheel-esque thing in any regard with communication to people, with the actual programming, and then like if I am finding a way to make that simpler, so it's just not like a time suck every week. So good reflection, I think, if anybody kind of wants to try that out.
Yeah, it's like a self retro, right? I do the same thing. I highly recommend doing. We were talking about retros earlier. Yeah, self retro. I do like a little 5 minutes each day if I remember to write down improvements or like things I notice, and then I'll review that weekly and see if was there a pattern here, and then usually that'll give you some insight.
I like that. I never heard it called self retro.
Yeah,
I like that.
It's less hippie. It's the same thing, but it's less hippie. I'm not meditating. I'm doing a self retro.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
I'm Isaac Askew. And
Dustin Rea.
and this is Never Rewrite.